Okay, so I'm going to actually remember to hit the go live. Uh, and it will. I've got a 10-second delay, so if we need to panic, we can panic. Uh,
I'm good at panicking. Yeah, sure.
okay, so let's see. I think we are live. Hi, everyone. This is Emacs chat number 22 after a long hiatus. And today I'm here with Shae Erisson, who is also like an Emacs fan from a long time back. So this is, as you were just saying, this is the first time we're actually talking live. And I'm looking forward to hearing about your configuration, how you use Emacs, Shae. But before we dive into that, can you give us a little bit of context? You know, who you are, what sorts of things you do, and how you use Emacs for that.
Uh, I would say that, let's see, I guess I started using Emacs in 1999 when I moved to Finland. And I remember about the same time I was on IRC, and I was really frustrated. I remember I got on the Perl IRC channel. I was like, hey, I want an editor that has syntax highlighting. I want to see colors to these words when I'm typing them. And they were like, nope, and they kick banned me. And I was like, well, maybe I don't want to learn Perl, which I never did. But and I guess that was an early introduction into I wanted to be part of communities where people were sharing positive things and building up each other. And actually, I ended up starting the Haskell IRC channel, I guess, a couple of years later, and that became a very big thing. I would say that I'm mostly known for my work in community building in the Haskell programming language community, because I did that for like, I don't know, 15 or 20 years. Um, but I really like Emacs. I think it's, I got, so like last week at the same time, I had the standing chat with a friend of mine who is also a programmer, and he said, oh, so you're going to do this thing in a week. Do you want to give me like a preview of the talk? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And some of the things that were really interesting was he was like, I've never really tried Emacs. I don't know much about it. I kind of have this impression that it is a very lightweight build your own editor toolkit. And I was kind of taken aback because, you know, I guess I still have this long ago and far away. I don't know if you remember the 8 megs and constantly swapping is what people used to call Emacs and things like that. And it was just kind of, I realized I'm still in my little echo chamber. And this is why I like to talk to other people all the time, is because I want to have some exposure to what other people are doing. I guess things about Emacs that really changed stuff for me is language server protocol, treesitter. Those I think are two very powerful tools. They're like much more generic than, I mean, Magit, of course, is like magic. Although I've mostly switched to jujutsu lately instead for the last year. Let's see, I did C++, I did Python, I did a whole lot of Python. And then I had Haskell jobs for 5 or 6 years. And then I switched to Rust about a year and a half ago. I now have a Rust job. And, you know, one of the things that Prot had asked, I think, or you had asked, and I forget exactly how this went. It was great fun watching your live stream. And it was, how does a new person kind of get comfortable with using Emacs for a particular purpose? And I look for things, in fact, like, how do I use Emacs for Rust development? And I found a couple of good guides on, and I was able to follow most of them, although my yasnippet stuff is broken, and I don't exactly know why tab doesn't work right. But, you know, like, there's always, Emacs is always fun, right? There's so many cool things you could do with it. I noticed, I actually hadn't seen your preview page, and I noticed that you found my Markov keyboard.
When you say Emacs is fun, I'm reminded of all of your fun, crazy keyboard, your keyboard experiments and all that. It's like, what? So, I have a feeling you like to tinker with things.
Yeah, and yeah, so I think actually the influences as to how I got to where I am are pretty interesting. So the person that I ended up moving to Finland for dating her, we started a company, we did EU projects, and I was the programmer. We had this pretty big project. I guess it was like 350,000 euros. And I mean, that was going to be over 4 years, and we had to kind of complete the whole thing. And I was the programmer, and we'd had the lowest bid. So, and I had an IBM Model M, you know, the super clicky with like all the, And about 3 years into it, my arm started really hurting a lot. And but I was the only programmer, and nobody else knew all the code, and we had to ship it because that's how we got paid. And so I ended up pushing through, and at the end of it, my arm just didn't work anymore. So for about a year and 3 months, what I did was I actually taught myself to type right-hand Dvorak because I was already using two-hand Dvorak, and so I kept programming. But one of the things I was like, all right, I like programming, I like using computers. I don't want to wear out my arms again. I don't want to blow them out. So I ended up switching to split keyboards, and I will show you. This is very much the kind of thing that I like to use, and that is like this. And so this isn't Ergodox Infinity, but there's a lot of other keyboard flavors like this. And one of the things that I particularly liked about this, so around the same time I met Jeff Raskin, who wrote the Humane Interface, and so for this particular thing, this is like Control and Alt and Hyper and Super and Shift. And this means that like under one thumb, I have a lot more modifier keys than you get off of a standard. And it also means, because a lot of my problems started with Emacs Pinky, the dreaded, the infamous, blowing out your, and I think that one of my, I made a keyboard layout called I Am Not a Koala. You may not know this, but koalas have two thumbs. They have one on each side. And that's cool, but I don't have two thumbs. And I realized that when I was trying to grab something, I didn't put my pinky around it. That would be silly, right? I would put my thumb around it. And so I decided I would move all of my chording keys under my thumbs. And that's kind of how another thing I did was when I was really only able to use one hand was I made my function keys mostly like purpose specific. And that was from Jeff Raskin's writings in the Humane Interface. So I guess I'm a programmer who really likes writing code, doesn't want to wear out my arms, and likes to do fun keyboard things. Yeah.
Definitely, you want, you're in it for the long term. You don't want to use up all of your arm capacity to now and not be able to keep programming in the future. And now there's hardware to make that easier. So I'm glad. I split keyboards with extra thumb keys seem to be very popular in the Emacs community. I'm now tempted to find space in my desk in order to make that happen.
Another thing I ended up switching to was I started using trackballs.
Oh yeah.
And so this is I tend to go completely overboard when trying out new things. So I bought 20 different models of trackballs and ended up settling on this one. The nice thing about this one is that this is how you scroll, and it has 4 buttons, and it's pretty easy to clean, and I'm a big fan.
That is really cool. I like using ThinkPad, so I've been just living off the tiny little mouse in the middle of the keyboard. But back in the day, I also used the trackball, so that is, if I can get to the point where I want to take my hands off the keyboard again in order to do mouse things, that would probably be the direction I would go.
I had an experiment in that area, which is where I purchased a 1-inch touchpad and I strapped it to my finger. And it was it was a PS2 and it had a USB converter and plugged into and the idea was I could keep typing and then I could like move the mouse around without taking my hands off the keyboard. And now they actually have touchpad rings they came out like 6 months or a year ago. It's relatively recent, but the idea is no change in context.
Huh. I've only seen the scroll rings, but now there's a touchpad version. That is interesting.
Yeah, I think that's
hardware.
Pretty cool stuff. Yeah, hardware is actually improving things. Another thing is one of the things you talked about with Prot was how do you learn other people's stuff? And one of the things that I use for pairing, so I have one coworker, and it's a strange, interesting job. I like it a lot, and and I met this coworker at a previous job, and one of the things, let's see if I can find it. So we used to, at the previous job, we used this thing called ttyshare. Have you heard of it?
No, not yet.
ttyshare, it's great. You can run it in a terminal, and then you can effectively share your terminal with someone else. And so you have multiplayer terminals, and that's neat. It was kind of a pain to set up. You had to make sure that you weren't natted. Like you had to have someone had to have a public IP. You had to do a couple of other things. And as part of my job, I'm now, I guess, part maintainer for Magic Wormhole, the software. And so one of the things that my coworker wrote was this nifty thing called shwim. and it's basically shell with me, and it's a wrapper around ttyshare so that with one single command, you can share a terminal. And the way that we use this is we both run Emacs as a server, and then we use Emacs client in the terminal to connect. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I can have a terminal right next to this, and if I run Emacs client in a window, then I'm sharing the same thing. This is a graphical, chat with Sasha, and I like in the terminal or in the UI, and both of them are updated.
That's fantastic. I remember people were using Teammate for something similar before, where you could share that. But yeah, it's just making it seamless, making it frictionless. And on an aside, I have also just been using Wormhole to send large files with back and forth between Karthik and John Wheatley, because we have this other Emacs chat thing where we're going to post it eventually once I finish figuring out how to redact all the personal information in org files. But yeah, it's great for being able to send things without having to worry about, what's my public ID? Can I tunnel all the different things to get past whatever firewalls there are? So if this also works for terminal things plus Emacs client, that sounds really, really exciting.
We've tried some other experiments. One of the things we tried to do was, and the only downside is, like, what if my terminal has a different size? Then you have to kind of shrink and match. And so we tried to honestly directly bridge to Emacs clients. And because I don't know if you're aware that there's effectively a local socket for the Emacs client that you can have multiple things connect to. But it turns out there's some sort of system weight. So I couldn't reach across the network and directly use my coworker's Emacs session, and he couldn't use mine. Weird things happened when we tried to do this cross host. As far as I can tell, Emacs client only works on the same host.
That's interesting. Lately, I've also been experimenting with CRDT, which has that Emacs Lisp client as well. So that's been nice. But yeah, of course, a lot of people will be kind of stuck at the first challenge of finding someone that they can pair in Emacs with.
I understand. And I think I'm honestly very happy that my one single coworker at this job is also a big Emacs user. And so we exchanged cool ideas and worked on stuff, and I'm very happy about that.
Were they already an Emacs person before they joined, or did you pick the coworker because they were an Emacs person?
They picked me. They were the one who started. They were pretty much the person who pretty much started this thing, and they picked me because they worked with me at the previous job. Although I did have an experience like that. I had this massive Emacs config file, like 20,000 lines, and half of it was comments because it had accrued over 20 years. And in 2019, when I first went to the Recurse Center, my first batch, I just was extremely extroverted and social. But my second immediate following batch, which is not the common pattern, I was like, okay, my goal was to write a bunch of Haskell, get some Haskell jobs, and so I went to the quiet room on the quiet floor, and but then someone else came in, Marianne, my favorite programming friend, and she was like, what is that keyboard you're using? And I was like, this is an Ergonomics thing. And then she's like, what is this editor you're using? And I was like, it's Emacs. And I was kind of a grumpy, I'm trying to get stuff done, but she was persistent. And she was like, show me this thing. And so I was like, I'll show you Emacs. And she was like, this is great. And I was like, oh, you like this thing? Oh, okay, cool. And so and I was like, I don't think you want my config. You'll probably want a starter kit. And she was like, well, what are starter kits? And I was like, well, I've heard about Spacemacs. I've heard about Doom. And I would try one of those. So she tried Spacemacs. And I guess this next part happened over several months. She tried Spacemacs. And then she was like, I like it, but it's slow. So I'm switching to Doom Emacs. And I would pair with her. And I was like, wow, look at all these cool things that the starter kits can do. And so I ended up flushing my entire 20-year-old config and kind of starting over and stealing a lot of great ideas from the starter kits. So, and Marianne is very ambitious, independent, hardworking, very focused. I'm not very focused, but I've learned a lot of things from her, and watching her kind of she's got a job writing C now, and I haven't done C and Emacs in a long time, so it's great fun to watch her learn these new things, and then I learn stuff too. And yeah, it's good to have a collaborative people to work with.
So it sounds like if people would like to encourage more people to talk to them about Emacs, feel free to use your strange keyboards out in public.
I like that. That's good. That is good. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've just recently started digging into the starter kits too because I realized I don't know much about them. It is really interesting going through them and discovering all these Emacs 31 options that you can enable to simplify your config or improve your workflow and all that stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff in starter kits, even for people who are not newcomers.
I agree, and I think there's nothing wrong with just learning a bunch of new things, trying them out, and also throwing them away if you don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
I've got like looking. Sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just about to say, okay, so now that you've declared Emacs bankruptcy and rebuilt your Emacs on top of other people's, starter kits, what has made it into your config? What have you kept from those 20 years of tinkering with Emacs that you really wanted to stick around?
I think the only thing that has absolutely stuck around is my use of hippie-expand, which is, I believe, a very old, an ancient tool from a different time. Most of the other stuff is kind of gone the wayside. But I really like, I honestly really like hippie-expand, and I know that I have rarely heard of other people who use hippie-expand, but you use it. I think you just muted yourself, but.
I also vote for hippie-expand. It's a nice way to try different functions and just say, I just want all these different possible completions to go in there.
Yeah, and the thing for me that really sold me on hippie-expand is that most of the time when I'm like doing something, I want to say like I can already see that word, just pick that one, and so I'll type the first few characters and hit like meta / and ta-da, it's usually there. But then sometimes I do really want like some eLisp or want some other stuff, and so I actually spent a lot of time tuning this the first time. And I actually only changed it for the first time recently because I was reading a how to write Rust well inside Emacs, and they said, oh well, you want to use yasnippet, and so the funny thing is that yasnippet, I believe, is the thing that got me into Emacs in 1999. I met this Finnish person, Erno Kuusala, in Oulu, Finland, and really cool guy, and because I was like, wow, how do you do this? As soon as you open a file, it's got like some structure and like a skeleton, and when you type part of a function or something, it just like populates it. And he was like, I'm using this snippet command in Emacs. That's where I was like, what's Emacs? And it was very exciting. And at the time I was using Vim, and Vim was not as, I don't want to say automatable.
Yeah, now like with NeoVim and Lua, people are writing more extensions for it. But before, you had to know like a lot of magic in order to customize Vim.
Right. I agree. Let's see, what else do I do? I run my own email server, and I of course read my email in Emacs, in GNU's no less, which is, I know, an NNTP reader, but it's still also a great. And I have like. I used to use Twiddle compile, and I think that stopped working like 6 years ago. So I need to get rid of this comment. But there's still a lot of kind of cruft from earlier times. Yeah, you remember how I said that like I use function keys to have like purpose-specific stuff? This was especially true because I had my left arm strapped to my chest for like a year and 3 months before I even started regaining any flexibility, and that meant that you couldn't use. You weren't gonna, unless you could do it all with one hand, so like chording, doing like keys. I ended up moving my most frequent operations directly to the function keys because I was still using the IBM Model M, and I could just press the button to do the thing. And that was very useful. Yeah, and so you can see some.
I'm amazed that you could just map them directly to single commands instead of giving into the temptation to make them prefixes for longer keystrokes.
I didn't really have the choice because I had only one arm that worked, and it was just a lot harder to do any chording at the time. And I mean, some of them, like I still have a lot of these, like F3 I use a lot, which is like, oh, what am I working on right now? Which is, that is like org clock go to. And a lot of times I want to have a terminal that's in Emacs, and so that's like vterm. And I actually really do use the calendar all the time, and this is like just switch to whatever it is. And of course my email is here, and yeah, I mean, you know what, let's see, do I have, so this, this, I don't know, have you seen this before? Have you seen this thing called started in an org mode file?
I use a started state, yes.
Well, I got it from you, so. So if I look at like my org mode configuration, like yeah, a lot of this like the started stuff I got from you. I don't know when, but you were the person who introduced me to it. So
yeah, it's the reminder that I did start working on this. I tend to get distracted by intermediate tasks, so it's nice to be able to say you try to finish these ones first before you move on to the next thing, maybe.
I agree. I have the same thing. Yeah, and I keep meaning, because like this is, I know that you can put org mode configuration into the first to-do item, and I would really like to move it into the E-list, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And it's been 10 years, so maybe I should just do it. One of the things I did that I found fun, I really have not written almost zero E-list, but I did actually puzzle my way through this, I guess a year ago, and that was, since so much of my life is in org mode, I learned how to make timers. And I mean, this is very close to what you get directly out of like the how to do timers in Emacs. And that was, after some amount of time, I want my org agenda to pop up, because I want to say like, oh, what is the stuff I'm supposed to be doing? And what am I forgetting? And what has been scheduled? And what is on my to-do list? And I also like to look at what is the stuff I've been working on lately. And I really like that a lot. You know, actually, another thing that I realized is that I had a blog post that was wildly popular. Where did I put it? And it was all about Emacs. I don't know if you saw the, where'd it go? It was, here it is. So here it is, and this is very much an Emacs.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that one. I put it in Emacs News. I thought it was great.
All right, cool.
I would like the kiddo to sometimes be able to acknowledge this, but this is not happening. Still, yes.
Right. Yeah, and so this was really fun, and because like I had a friend, he was development, and there was like millions of dollars spent on how do you detect whether a programmer is in flow, and it came down to if they're being a programmer, they're probably in flow. So, and that was it, because they tried like hooking up PEGs and doing all kinds of other stuff, but it was like, if they're typing, don't interrupt them. And I don't know, like, because I do so much in Emacs, I'm not sure how accurate this was, but that's where I learned to do timers the first time, or maybe I don't remember which one I did first. And the idea then was, as soon as like basically my average typing into Emacs has gone up a certain amount, then it will actually switch to busy. And it works just fine. It was a lot of fun to write.
So yeah, interesting use of getting the activity data, I guess. And I've seen other fun implementations of this. Like I think there's a combo package that makes some fun animation appear if you're typing really quickly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm guessing, because I think the Atom editor had that for a while.
Yeah, okay, that
I'm
makes
guessing
sense.
that's where it came from. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, because you can instrument Emacs and play around with it, you can certainly do all sorts of things based on that information. Okay, so you've got it set up so that when you come back to your computer, it'll show you the stuff that you've been working on. And when you're working on the things, you can tell it to tell the rest of the world not to bug you. Gotcha.
That's right.
What other fun stuff do you have in there?
I guess that, I mean, lately I have been, no, is not that right? Well, I discovered that I love the EF themes. I love the modus themes. They make me very happy. You know, they're just like unreasonably pleasant. As someone who has tried, it feels like every single Emacs theme ever, they're just my favorite themes. And so, and at the moment, it's summer. Oh no, where did my summer go? What am I? How can this be? Yeah, themes. There we go. Oh, I'm running spring. You know what? Wait, isn't spring over? Hasn't summer just started? You know what I was thinking would be fun would be take the time of day, and you know that the EF themes has like spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And I'm not sure if there are dark versions of each of those, but I thought I know that modus-themes will do this, like check for the local time of your like when it turns dark, and then it will go from the light theme to the dark theme as soon as the sun hits. And I was like, well, what if I do that for seasons? Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, you just this like subtle sense of change as you go through the year.
Right.
But of course, you have this thing there where you also just randomize it.
Well, I like that. Like sometimes it's like I'm just kind of like I'm bored. I'm just bored of what I'm looking at, and so I will just like change my thing, And it's just time for something. I don't know. It seems to work. It's like it gives me a little brain break from what I was staring at, and I did not know I was going to reset the text scale, but yeah, that's fine.
Interesting.
What else do I have in here? Oh, Emacs htmlize. I'm a little sad. I switched to Wayland. And as I remember correctly, htmlize only works with, or maybe htmlize still works, and it's the SVG one that doesn't work. Emacs SVG is a thing on that if you're running with an X11 backend, you can turn your current screen directly into an SVG, which is really cute. It does not work in Wayland. I think htmlize does still work. What other things do I have in here? I don't know. I guess a lot of it lately has been trying to make Rust things work smoothly. I've been trying to do some, I wonder, oh, cool. That was not what I expected. I just started doing this thing with imenu. Imenu integrates nicely with LSP.
That is a very pretty sidebar thing, and I need to learn how to do that.
So because I have all these extra modifiers, my super I is lsp-ui-imenu. And the reason that what I mostly use that for is when I have like a bunch of Rust code and I want to quickly jump through the structure of it, then that integrates with LSP, finds all the definitions, and I can quickly jump through it. I used to use LSP treemax for that, but LSP treemax puts things in its own order, not quite the same order I want, although treemax is quite nice. I think that the thing to do is that you and I, at some time, maybe the next time if we do this again, we should set up with a shwim connection, and you and I can both share our Emacs, and then you can show me cool things that you do, and I can show you cool things that I do, and then we can start filing over some of the neat things. How about that?
That sounds fantastic. I know we'd wanted to experiment with pair programming a long time ago, so that sounds like a seamless way to do it. And that therefore I will go and figure out how to install shwim and get it working. I will probably need you around to actually test it. I think I can rustle up. Maybe it'll work off my phone.
We haven't tried that.
Yeah, but lsp-ui. Okay, so I've just been using like straight up imenu like a Neanderthal. But lsp-ui has like this fancy grouping of things and colors and stuff. So I definitely want to check that out.
I'm a fan. Yeah. I don't know, but do I have anything else exciting that's in here? I will say that at the moment, the system I'm working on, I like buying unreasonably powerful laptops, and so this system has 128 gigs of RAM and 24 cores, and this is actually my previous laptop has 192 gigs of RAM. Anyway, but long story short. I end up in a lot of cases where I want to use more memory. I want to I've got all these cores. Can you do something with them? And so perhaps you've already seen things like LSP Doctor, which will say, have you tried this thing? Have you done this other thing? LSP has really changed.
I have not. Would you like to show me this LSP Doctor thing? Because I have not ever seen it.
Yeah. Do you use language server? Do you use language servers much for your development?
I am only just getting used to having a relatively modern, like 2018 instead of 2010 laptop, and so I have the red squigglies and various things, but I don't know what to do with them yet.
I'm doing a lot of this. So I have Originally for me, it was like I spent a lot of time with the Haskell language server because I was doing so much Haskell, and it was a super powerful thing. In fact, somebody decided to hammer in half of a proof assistant into the Haskell language server, and that was magic. You could do incredible stuff with that because you could just grab all of your local variables and transform the whole shape of your function, and you could just write little snippets and just have it like work. And that was, it was amazing. It wasn't quite one of the goals that I believe is for future development of all programming editors. I believe that something like Emacs macros, but instead for abstract syntax trees, I believe this is an essential ingredient that we do not yet have. And I think that treesitter is the first step towards there. We now have one of the hats, right? Which is where we can take treesitter is you know, if you've used it, it is like we write some effectively C code to produce a really fast parser, or is it like JavaScript that then compiles to C code? I forget exactly how it works. But the nice thing about treesitter is, I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do remember, that if you were writing Python code and you used a triple quoted string, you had to then add a comment with another quote because regular expressions is how Emacs was doing all of the syntax highlighting. And honestly, that was kind of crap. And then there were projects like the Semantic Bovinator that made a full parsing like suite in eLisp, which to me is like half brilliant and half insane. And then there was treesitter, which kind of took over the world because it was, I think that like the language server and treesitter are the first two of these editor generic pieces. And I suspect there will be more. I think that something where you can modify the abstract syntax tree and then go back to the source is one of those potential paths forward. I hope so.
Yeah, that would be great if you could just do the manipulations and then round trip it back into source code. You just regenerate the changed part of your code. That sounds fantastic. So it sounds like you were able to do some kind of manipulation with the Haskell use case that you were describing. Any chance you can show us like the awesomeness?
Sadly, that sadly does not work anymore. But you know, if you're looking for something in the area, have you heard of Emacs library called Combobulate?
I have heard of it. I haven't dug into it.
So it uses treesitter for source code manipulation by, and it's a lot closer to the way that, like, you know, in org mode, you can like hold meta and arrow to kind of move things around. And it uses like treesitter to let you both move around in the context as well as actually, you know, alter the shape. And to me, this is like the first step towards this tool that I want, which is where I can write a keyboard macro and have it edit an abstract syntax tree, and then like spit the results back into the buffer. Yeah.
All right. What else are you using your 126 gigabytes of RAM for?
Let's see. Honestly, I'm going to tell you that Rust Analyzer can take a lot of memory. And a Rust compilation can take a lot of cores. And I'm okay with that because, I mean, I do like, and I will say that this laptop is actually from this year. So it's a brand new, like, top of the line. But then, like, how would I, because I've got like, Prime, which I think is a bunch of matrix multiplication hardware. How do I use that from Emacs? I don't know. But I'm sure I can find something, you know.
Maybe voice computing? Could you find
that's an idea. Yeah. One of my friends, she's using Talon. Have you heard of Talon?
Yeah, I've heard of Talon. There were a couple of videos about people using Talon to code by voice, usually involving memorizing kind of a different alphabet for very, very quickly accessing different shortcuts. But it sounds really cool, and you sound like you got the hardware to do something amazing with it.
That's true. Well, you know, the Talon actually lets you do something very similar to Combobulate, where you can navigate the AST of your source code. And you can kind of move around very quickly. I don't know, like, I don't know, are we like at the end of our? No, we're halfway through, right?
We're halfway through. I have about 28 minutes before the kiddo runs out and starts demanding lunch.
Okay, well, I feel like I've been like driving the structure of our just kind of like dumping random things in you. Did you have any questions, or did you anything you wanted to cover? Or?
This is all amazing. I come in with no preconceived notions. I'm just like, okay, Shepard does cool things with Emacs. Let's hear about it. Let's go.
That works for me. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's been focused on Rust development lately. Rust and jujutsu. I've been doing a lot of Nix. I'm running Nixos. I don't know if you're familiar, but that's been great fun. It's funny. I feel like I've been following Steve Purcell around, and from a technical perspective, like I'm always about 5 years behind Steve. Like I was like, oh, the Nixos is kind of a pain with Emacs, and because there's like this what was it, Nixenv? I forget. Anyway, Steve was like, oh, well, have you tried my library, nvarc? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, well, now each buffer can have its own nvarc. And I was like, it's perfect. Like, that's exactly what I need. Because previously, every time I switched buffers, it would then go load all of the local everything in Nix. And sometimes that could take a long time, especially if I'm doing Haskell. That could take 10 seconds, and I really don't want that sort of lag. And so Steve Purcell's brilliant library, nvarc, says, you know what, every single buffer can just keep such a thing, and then you can only reload it when you need to, and that's pretty awesome.
That sounds cool, and I should check that out too. Jackson has a question. He says, I was curious about what you were tracking your time working on, how you track it. Is it just org clock? So this is how you keep track of the things you're working on, and what got interrupted by the new thing that you just added to the stack and so forth.
Right. In fact, I have this thing. Honestly, when I sit down on my computer, I just clock in. You'll notice in the bottom right here, we have chat with Sasha, right? And so I just kind of clock into stuff. And I'm not always, I really kind of need to reorganize my org mode files, because I've been naming them per host, because I previously had a work org mode and I had a home org mode, and now that my home hardware is also my work hardware, I guess. And so I still have my previous laptop's things where I'm keeping my events. I really need to reorganize things. But I schedule things. I've got a weird thing to show you. You want to see something really strange? I decided that it would be great fun to do my taxes.
You are showing me your taxes, so I need to black out this whole thing.
Okay. Well, this is actually just an example from the docs. So,
all right.
And I could actually show my taxes on it, because I mostly don't care. But I think in fact you can figure out exactly how much money I'm making by looking at the open whatever. The thing about this is that this is. I decided to file all of my tax forms directly into org mode spreadsheets, and then do remote lookups. So basically, each spreadsheet was one particular form, and then once I'd gotten to the bottom, I need this result, what's my estimated income, and then I would use the lookup, kind of this cross spreadsheet lookup, and that's how I did my taxes for last year. And then my de facto mother-in-law, she's an accountant, and she didn't exactly, do this thing, but it was pretty close. She was like, "You've got all your taxes in a spreadsheet." And I was like, "Yeah." And then she looked at it and she was like, "What is that?" And I was like, anyway, so I got to kind of file everything back out into TurboTax, but that was a fun thing to build, was to.
Yeah, I have something like that too. So, for example, whenever I do my tax paperwork, I just have to have the step-by-step checklist. Okay, this is where I need to go to get this number. This is where I can put it in, and then eventually it spits out a table that says, okay, put this in box 11, put this in box 13, so that I don't have to do the steps by hand, because even before the for me, I use Simple Stacks or whatever. It's web-based. But before you get to the point where you can put the numbers in the form, you gotta go to this website, calculate this thing, and org just makes all of that so much easier.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this remote lookup thing is something I'm always looking up, because of org tables are so powerful, but also I need more examples in my life to remember how to use them.
Well, I think it took me 4 hours the first time to get it all figured out. But I can send you an example without showing it here. I can send you an example, because I think I've hammered the remote lookup down very thoroughly.
And once you've got it right, you can just keep filling that in or copy and paste it. You have an example of the syntax, and that's already all you need.
Right. I did run across some limitations of the the kind of the evaluation method of org mode spreadsheets, but maybe I've been kind of using them a little too hard, if that makes any sense. So.
Oh, what kind of limitation?
And that is honestly, I think I finally ended up a way to. I think I finally found a way to say every single. I basically, because it was because really the way that spreadsheets work is they're much more like data flow, and that is just that you end up with like either you work from the endpoint, which is like much more Haskell style evaluation, which is where you're like, I need to start here. What is this? What depends on this? But in the case where you have a whole bunch of different org mode spreadsheets, I think I ended up with this LaTeX style hack where I just ran it a bunch of times. So it's like evaluate, because remote lookups. I ran, I don't remember, and I think I took notes, but I don't remember. That's one of the great things about org mode is that I swear it's my like half of my brain is in my org mode notes, and whenever I'm like, oh, what was that thing? I'm like, well, fortunately, with my terrible short-term memory, I took copious notes because otherwise I would never be able to get back to it. And
all right, what is your favorite way of finding those notes?
I actually use a lot of Control S, just like because I kind of have some idea of where they are in my tree structure. And I'll also say I use a lot of my org capture templates, and they're not super complicated. I have like a to-do, I have a journal, I have ideas, and like random ideas will float into my head. Like you saw Markov keyboard, right? It's just like the weirdest art piece you've seen all day, right? And Markov keyboard shows up on the front page of Hacker News like once a year or so, and people are like, programmers have gone too far. This is terrible, and or like this cannot possibly be usable by humans or something. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think it was art, and so a lot of times those things will drop into my head, something like that, where I'm trying to do something else, and so I will quickly write down the idea, and then just gotten it out of my head enough that I can continue with what I was doing. And so I have long lists of strange ideas. A recent one was. Like you've probably had your teeth worked on once or twice, and you know that the dentist always had to move the light around. And I'm like, but we have really good eye tracking. Wouldn't it make sense to figure out where the dentist or the car mechanic is, what they're looking at, and then have the light like move around behind them to figure out how to actually light up the place they're looking at, right? We've got vision tracking. Why don't we do this? But I don't really, I decided maybe I don't want to work on that one right now. So
it sounds like an involved project. That is
yeah.
Okay, so you're capturing, you're stuffing a lot of these ideas into an inbox. A lot of people are probably in the same boat where they've got these inboxes full of ideas. How do you deal?
I archive stuff when I'm done with it.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so a lot of times, and I find this very valuable, is like if I look at, do I have a... Oops, that was not what I meant to do.
All right, so you basically just do aggressive speed commands, archive, or look at the agenda and just mark a whole bunch of things and say, that's it, that's gone. It was written down and then it can go.
Yeah, well, when I'm really done with something, when like the thing is finished, then I will just archive it. And I mean, do you use archive much?
I do. I have a function that goes through my inbox file and just archives anything that was marked as done. So basically, if I didn't bother to, because that way it clears it up, right? So otherwise, so I'll refile things where I'm like, okay, it's done, but it has important information. I want to put it somewhere else. But if it's just a transitory task that I'm, using to remind myself, tomorrow I have to do this, go find the water bottle. When it's done, I don't need to know about it in the future. So it's left in my inbox because I checked it off, and then periodically I'll say clean up inbox. Not only will it remove all of the done things, but if I leave a tag in the text of in the title of the task, or if the task matches certain regular expressions, it will refile it to the appropriate place in my kind of more permanent thing. So I can say, okay, all of my Emacs related tasks will get automatically refiled to my Emacs category without my having to do that manually.
So you're using tagging, because I kept trying it in tagging and never quite did it.
I use tagging sometimes when I remember it, but this is also why I use the regular expression match against the title. So I can just, because I'm using Orgsly on Android to capture the thing on my phone, and I might want to say, this is a consulting task, file it in the right place so it doesn't get lost in my inbox.
Oh, wow. So when is your interview so I can learn from your tricks?
This is now. Here we go.
Oh, good.
I
Okay.
don't know. I mean, well, you can ask questions, and the nice thing about conversations is that we jostle different ideas, and we were like, oh yeah, maybe I should write a blog post about that because I take it for granted. So now apparently I have to write a blog post about my inbox cleaning up process. My inbox is very long. The other thing, speaking of dealing with really long lists, that I picked up from John Wigley was I also sometimes remember to check this list of random items. So in my agenda, there's also like this random selection of things that I have not gotten around to thinking about further, but it's there just in case serendipity or boredom make me do something.
I think that I've thought about having, because I've got the pop-up, this little timer that pops up my agenda, but I've thought about maybe adding a section. I don't know if I could add a section here, but it would be something that says like, at the bottom, here's 2 or 3 random to-dos that have been open for a while, just like for garbage collection. Because like I know that in jujutsu, I've got a cool little query that says, if you have any change sets that are more than 2 weeks old and are not in a permanent branch state, maybe you should do something about them. It's just called like to do. It'd be kind of nice to have that for work mode as well.
Yeah, it's just and our brains do these strange things with randomness, right? They're like, ooh, I want to see what's new now.
Right, yeah.
You
Well,
might
I have
as
a
well use it for
question.
good.
You had this thing. You had this thing where you had. I saw you taking notes with Prot, and you had this like timestamp.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'm
what
using
is
it
that?
now. Okay. So I have it bound 2 ways now. I have it as a DABREV, so dynamic abbreviation, and I also have it as a yasnippet because sometimes I'm using it either as space or tab to complete it, and I don't really want to think. I just want to get the timestamp in and then move on. And so abrevs can run functions to evaluate it. You can insert the timestamp that way, or yasnippet, of course, can evaluate the thing. And now I have those. It's basically just a wall clock time, so that I can go back and plop in the chapter of the chapters as time offsets, which are automatically calculated from the YouTube data on when the stream started. So I don't have to like manually calculate my chapters. But it's super useful to have just times everywhere. And in this case, during a conversation, I want to be able to say, hey, we talked about something interesting. And then be able to go back to that point in the video later on.
So you're matching. Oh,
So
wow.
my shortcut for yasnippet is OT because I never type OT elsewhere, and it's close enough. I use Dvorak, so my O is on home
Me
row,
too.
and yeah, and T is like close by. Also on the other hand, so it's there you go, there you
Did
go.
I already show you that this is actually Dvorak?
I can't. Oh, there you go. Now I can see the keycaps. Yeah, earlier it was kind of blurry, but now yes.
Right.
So yes, that is my shortcut for inserting the timestamp. I previously added seconds as well, but then I realized that my kind might be false precision. So I just just use a minute at the moment, and then I go back and adjust the timestamps a little bit later. But yeah, you can use abbreviations for all sorts of things, including times and dates and
Wow.
stuff. Yeah.
So have you ever tried org timestamp or?
Yeah, org timer. So org timer gives you a relative timestamp, right? You can say org timer. Oh, okay. So sorry. You're, are you talking about the Control U Control C exclamation mark or something of the sort? Yeah.
Uh,
So that's actually what I initially was doing, but then it was too many keystroke with modifiers to remember. And then I had to press enter to select the thing. So now I just have an abbreviation insert the org mode formatted timestamp for me. And then I have this code that searches for org timestamp regular expression and then does the calculation and conversion and stuff. So org timer is a separate thing. It's useful for meetings and things like that. You would say, okay, your org timer start at the beginning of the meeting, and then you can have a list, and it automatically, like if you Alt Shift Enter or something like that in the list, it'll automatically like insert the right relative timer to it. There you go. So there's an like org timer start, but the reason I didn't go that approach was because then you A, have to remember to actually start the timer, and B, then you have to synchronize your time with video time, which might not have started at the same time. So now I'm just like, okay, wall clock for everything, and then I can do the transformation with whatever I like. And since I'm editing my subtitles in Emacs, I can say, hey, this file started at this time according to YouTube, and then just map all of the wall clocks to the appropriate subtitle times appropriately.
Wow,
That's
really cool.
Anyway, so timers, relative, absolute, and using abbreviations is great. Which I think actually is a thing that I picked up from Carl Voigt, because he also likes to use, he has an abbreviation not at the Emacs level, but he has an abbreviation on his system level, like with his window manager, so he can use this timestamp trick anywhere, including in Etherpad or wherever else where you want to insert the date and time. That's VOIT, by the way, but yeah, so times are a great way to just leave yourself a pointer to that moment so you can go back to it later.
Well, now I'm curious, how well does that integrate with this sort of thing? Because I really like looking back at my history agenda.
Yeah. So it's if you have it insert an inactive timestamp, I think it should still show up there. It's kind of, I think it will be a little like those.
Yeah, it looks like these two are showing up.
Yeah.
Agenda.
Yeah, so that's a basic thing that I would have inserted by my either abrev or so it's not even debrev, it's just regular abrev in Emacs.
What's the difference?
Then debrev is like hippie-expand. Like, okay, so let me just double check here. I feel like debrev is it's sort of hippie-expandish. It looks in your buffer, or possibly other buffers, and I think let me just hippie-expand and debrev, they kind of work together. It's an option to have them work together. Okay, so hippie-expand is, so I see. Hippie-expand is the more advanced version of debrev. Debrev was dynamic expand, and hippie-expand says, yeah, that, but try a whole bunch of other things first. But my timestamp thing is actually just done by a regular abrev, and I will find the thing in my config for OTE. Here we are.
I
will put it in my chat.
My spelling, most people say my emails are spelled really well, but it's only because I have iSpell set up.
Yeah, iSpell is great. I am learning French, and therefore my
Oh,
iSpell
c'est très
French.
bien. Je parle un peu de français aussi.
Oui. I'm keeping a journal in French on my blog, and I have the Tatueba project with all the example sentences, and I have a consult interface to look up stuff in them, so I can just borrow other people's words and try to make it sound more natural. Plus,
Very
of course,
cool.
the usual like searching for words and dictionaries and stuff. Anyway, in the chat, I put in my global abrev table definition for insert format time string. In case you want to steal that, it's right there.
I will definitely save that into my notes here. That's another thing I use a lot is I use org mode snippets.
Oh yeah.
And I will tell you that like the first time I guess if I look back at do I have that? Let's see. This is another thing that I have done a lot of in the past, which is where I love the fact that org mode snippets are just executable and I can just run them. I guess 3 jobs ago, there was a case where because I would keep the results around and look at them. There's a case where I guess a couple of months before something got shipped to a customer, I noticed our database schema had changed, and I prevented a tremendous amount of upset and emergency by being like, that doesn't look right. Like I got one from like 2 weeks ago and it does not match and something's wrong here. Everybody's like, I don't think so, Shae. And I'm like, no, we really have a problem. We've got to fix this. And then they were like, oh crap, you found, And I was like, yeah, I found a problem.
Yeah, I basically try to do as much in a snippet instead of in in a scratch buffer or whatever, just because having that record of the fact that I did it, and also any notes that I had leading up to it, and the output of it, if there is, it's just so helpful.
Oh, I've got a cool thing that I'm doing for work.
Oh yeah.
And that is that our README file is not only an org file, but we also have the demonstration of our actual thing is done by using like dependent snippets. And so that means that like if you want that, perhaps this is something everyone already knows, I don't know, but we basically are using the results of earlier commands in later places. And the other nice thing about that is that then when we want to check, we have the effectively doc tests, right? When we want to check and see if our software works the way it does in the README, we evaluate the final org mode snippet, which then calls out before, and then if something blows up, we're like, oh, well, I guess we need to fix something. And so it was pretty exciting to put org mode niftiness into my work README file,
Nice. And you didn't mention your other coworker is on board with the whole Emacs thing. So that's one of the things that people are often like, I want to use org mode and I want to use it for like the documentation or the testing or whatever, but they got to get everyone else on board with the thing. Otherwise it's Jupyter notebooks or whatever else, right?
Right. Okay, so I have a joke for you that I came up with a long time ago, and that is, do you know there's only one way that Sauron could have organized the invasion of Middle Earth, and do you know what he used?
What?
Orc mode. It's a terrible joke, isn't it?
That's okay. I'm sure someone in the comments will come up with an even worse pun, and then
I'm excited. It's going to be great.
Never underestimate the punniness of the Emacs community.
I completely agree. I don't know. Do I have anything else exciting in here? I actually really like this one. I used to run all of my tests in compile. F12. I have F12 bound to compile, and one of the things I wanted something where it was, if the compile is successful, don't show me the results because everything's good. And so like since I'm doing stuff in Rust, when I run all the tests, it leaves the buffer up, and I need to get around to actually doing something like this for rustic mode as well, where when the tests pass, just go away because it's all good, and when the tests don't pass, show me where I need to look at the problem. And I got this from Enberg on Emacs, like, I don't know, 20 years ago. Maybe it was less than 20 years ago, but it probably wasn't. So, there's so much good stuff. There's just so much good stuff. And I also like to, look, here we go. You can see that this is long gone, by the way. It's not there anymore, but
I have like a proper, it's sashachua.com/.emacs, a lot easier to remember. But yeah, and I think that's I remember that now. Def advice is also obsolete. The new hotness is advice ad or something like that.
Oh really? Oh, I need to make a to-do item for there.
Yeah. But do you share your? I was thinking through my notes trying to find. Do you share your config anywhere?
No, but at this point, if I was showing on YouTube, I might as well just throw it up somewhere. Why not? It's not very exciting. Like if you look at someone like Ross Baker who has magic, like wow, is there some magic coming in from Ross Baker? I'm so excited to see more stuff from him. There's just like, I guess I feel like compared to almost everybody else I know, I feel like a power user. Because I'm like, I wish I could do this thing. And a lot of times someone I know is like, well, I did that thing, and here's a library. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have to do it. And I guess I feel like I'm a power user. And on the good side, I guess I I really haven't written that much eLisp ever. Like I was saying in the comments during your interview with Pratt, and I kind of like to. It's just, I guess it's never quite gotten to the top of my stack, and I did decide it was time for me to send money to Pratt for at least for themes, if not for like, please teach me some eLisp so I can actually, because it's not that Lisp is hard. It's more like, how do I what are the things I interact with? Kind of like what are the words? What's the vocabulary of working with Emacs? And I don't actually really know. I mean, like as a user, sure, I can do cool stuff. I can do Lisp macros. I've done Scheme and Lisp some in the past, but not inside Emacs. So.
All right. So let me clarify. After more than 20 years of using Emacs, did you say you feel like a power user? Do not feel like a power user?
I definitely feel like a power user, but I don't feel like someone who's very good who does much of anything with eLisp. I don't really feel like someone who has much of a clue on the internals, and that's not entirely true. Like I have some of the ideas, but for the most part, I haven't actually needed to know that much about the internals. And sure, I've dug into things like how do you efficiently work with like large buffers in your workman, and like how to like the ropes data structure and stuff like that. That was more for fun, but although it is something that Emacs does and does extremely well, but I kind of like to like. There's a lot of things I'd kind of like to change, and I don't really have enough of the understanding of the kind of how I would write the eLisp to do it. Here's a good example. When I hit F3, it takes me to the one I'm currently clocked into.
Yeah.
Unless I haven't clocked in to something since I started Emacs. And honestly, I would like to use something like orgql, the org query language, to go find, if I've just started Emacs, or it does not know about something, I'm like, you know what? I just want you to go search for it. I have so many cores and so much memory. Just go find it.
That sounds like an excellent reason to go learn Emacs Lisp so that you can have it. If you're not currently clocked in, go find the most recent clocked in task and go there. Or maybe present you with a list of things and and then go from there. I would love to hear about your Emacs Lisp learning journey, because that's one of the big things that moves people from, power users, yes, but users, to using Emacs as a lightweight editor toolkit for something that's custom fit to exactly what their workflow is. And on that note, I'm going to try to wrap up gracefully before the kiddos, just like drags me out here. So thank you so much for doing this. I look forward to more conversations. I'm going to post the transcript and other things like that pretty quickly, I think, because I have this nice workflow now that lets me take screenshots and everything. But there's so much here that I want to unpack. But I hear the kiddo. Bye.